The wind that swept across the high towers of Dhorvale carried with it whispers of unease. Though the people sang Rogan's new name, Iceborn, in taverns and marketplaces, not all voices were raised in celebration. For in the shadows of council chambers and forgotten crypts, another story was being written, one that threatened to turn triumph into ash. Far from the great hall, in a chamber beneath the earth, where even torches feared to burn, the council gathered. Their faces were hidden beneath cowls, their words wrapped in secrecy. A single lantern cast long shadows that seemed to crawl across the walls like living things. "He grows too strong," muttered one voice, sharp as a knife. "Already men speak of him as a hero. Soon he will be more than a lord, he will be a legend." "A legend is harder to kill than a man," another answered. "We must act before the name takes root deeper than the blade." At the head of the table, the High Chancellor leaned forward. His hands, thin as parchment, rested on the stone. "Legends fall, just as men do," he said, "but some require sharper instruments." From the darkness, a figure stirred, clad in robes blacker than pitch, his face hidden by a hood. He moved with the stillness of a serpent. The air grew colder as he raised his hand, revealing fingers etched with runes that glowed faintly blue. "You summoned me to strike at Iceborn," the sorcerer said, his voice like wind scraping across a frozen grave. "But magic is not coin to be spent lightly. What will you offer in return?" The council shifted uneasily. It was no small thing to parley with one such as he. His name was Kaelor, whispered in old songs as a betrayer of kings and a weaver of storms. To bind his service was to bind chaos itself. The High Chancellor spoke again, steady though his heart raced. "You shall have what you desire most. A place to practice your art without chains, without judgment, without the hand of law upon your shoulder. In return, you will break Iceborn, not just his body, his name, his very soul." A silence fell. Then Kaelor's laughter filled the chamber, hollow and cruel. "You promise freedom," he said. "Very well. I will weave a curse not of death, but of doubt. His blade will falter. His allies will see shadows in his light. And when the time comes, he will walk into his own ruin, believing it to be triumph." The council bowed their heads. The pact was made. Far above, unaware of the doom being forged against him, Rogan stood on the battlements of Dhorvale. Snowflakes spiraled in the night air, settling on his dark hair like stars fallen from the heavens. Aelin stood beside him, her silver gaze fixed on the horizon. "They cheer your name," she said softly, "but beware, names are banners, and banners draw arrows." Rogan gave a short, bitter laugh. "So I've been told. Do you see enemies in every shadow too, Aelin?" Her eyes flicked to his, sharp as drawn steel. "Not in every shadow, only the ones that move when they should not." As if to echo her words, a raven cawed from the parapet, its feathers slick with frost. Rogan frowned, for this was no common bird. Its eyes burned faintly red, and around its leg was tied a scrap of parchment. Aelin snatched it swiftly, her lips tightening as she read. "The north stirs. The Iceborn shall fall." Rogan's hand clenched on the hilt of his sword. He did not know it yet, but the council's pact had already begun to take form. Somewhere in the night, Kaelor whispered his first spell, and with it, the fate of Iceborn began to turn. The first sign came with the frost. Winter had settled over Dhorvale in a mantle of white. The rivers were locked in ice, the fields slept under snowdrifts, and even the walls of the keep groaned as the cold pressed against stone. Yet this was no ordinary winter. The frost cut deeper, creeping into bones, into dreams, into the very marrow of men. Rogan felt it first, not on the battlefield but in the quiet of his chamber. One night as the torches guttered and the wind howled beyond the shuttered windows, he woke with his breath misting before him. His blankets had turned brittle with ice, though no snow had fallen indoors. At his bedside his sword lay rimed with frost, as though it had been left out in a storm. He reached for it, and in that moment a voice whispered, not aloud, not in the room, but inside his mind, "You are not worthy of Iceborn. You are but a man, and men break." Rogan staggered back, his heart hammering. He scanned the chamber, nothing but shadows, yet the words lingered, curling in his skull like smoke. The next day, Training with his men, his grip faltered. A sword he had lifted 1,000 times now felt heavy, awkward. His blow missed its mark, striking air where an enemy's shoulder should have been. The soldiers laughed, not cruelly, but with surprise. Still, their eyes darted, quick and uncertain. Doubt, once planted, was a seed that grew fast. By the third day, whispers followed him in the hall. They say the Iceborn stumbles. Perhaps the cold has claimed his strength. No man can carry a name forever. Rogan clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened. He wanted to shout, to silence them. But even as anger burned in him, so too did fear. For in the mirror of his chamber, he no longer saw the lord who had stood triumphant at the gates. He saw a stranger, his eyes shadowed, his breath ragged, his hand trembling as though weighed by unseen chains. Aelin noticed. She always noticed. She found him one evening on the battlements, staring at the snow like a man staring into an abyss. "Rogan," she said gently, her cloak whipping in the wind. "What is it? You've grown distant, quieter." He turned, and for the first time in years, she saw fear in his eyes. "There is something in me," he confessed. "A shadow that was not there before. At night I hear it whisper. By day my strength falters. It is as though the very cold I was born to command is turning against me." Aelin stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "This is no common ailment. Someone has set a curse upon you." Rogan laughed harshly, though it held no mirth. "A curse? Then name me Cursed-born, not Iceborn." But she did not laugh. Her eyes, silver and unblinking, searched the horizon. "If it is sorcery, then it has a hand behind it. A man, a council, a pact. Whoever wove this seeks not your death alone, but your unmaking." The raven returned that night. Its feathers glistened with frost, though no snow fell. Around its leg was tied another scrap of parchment. "The hero falls not by sword, but by silence. His friends will doubt, his name will rot." Rogan crushed the message in his hand, fury igniting where fear had been. "Let them whisper," he growled. "Let them doubt. I will hunt the one who does this, and I will tear the truth from their throat." But even as he spoke, the frost deepened, crawling across the stone beneath his feet. Somewhere far away, Kaelor smiled in the dark. The curse did not ease. Each night, Rohan dreamed of frostbitten fields and voices in the snow. Each dawn, he woke weaker, as though the cold was draining his very lifeblood. By the week's end, his sword arm shook, and his men no longer sought his counsel with the same eagerness. The Iceborn name, once a banner, now hung heavy as a chain. Aelin pressed him. "You cannot sit idle while this shadow consumes you. There are whispers of a hermit north of the Rimewood, an exile who once studied the black arts. If anyone can name the curse, it is he." Rohan resisted at first. To seek aid from a sorcerer was to admit weakness. But as another day passed and he nearly collapsed in the training yard, he relented. At dawn, cloaked in furs, he mounted his stallion and rode with only 2 guards and Ellen beside him. The snow lay deep across the hills, muffling sound, turning the world into a pale grave. For 3 days they traveled into the Rimewood, where the trees stood like skeletal sentinels and silence pressed close. It was on the 4th night they found him. The hermit's hut was half buried in snow, its roof sagging, its walls crooked. Smoke curled weakly from the chimney, carrying with it a scent both sweet and bitter. When Rohan dismounted, the door opened as if on cue. The man within was withered, his skin stretched thin over bones, his eyes pale as mist. Yet his voice, when he spoke, held a strength that belied his form. "You carry a weight that is not your own, Lord of Frost." Rohan stiffened. "You know my name?" "I know the name they gave you," the hermit said, gesturing them inside. "But names are masks. Yours is cracking." The hut was cluttered with scrolls, herbs, bones of birds and beasts. Strange sigils had been carved into the wood, glowing faintly blue. "Tell me of this curse," the hermit urged. Rohan recounted the whispers, the frost on his sword, the weakness in his limbs. When he spoke of the raven and its messages, the hermit grew still, his expression grave. "This is not nature's frost," he said at last. "It is a binding, a tether from afar, Someone feeds upon your strength even now. They drain you to swell their own power." "Who?" Rohan demanded. "Name him." The hermit's eyes narrowed. "I cannot see the weaver, only the weave. But I can tell you this. The hand behind it is clever, patient and clothed in shadows. He does not strike openly because he fears your blade. Instead, he rots you from within." Aelin leaned forward. "Can it be broken?" The hermit hesitated. "Perhaps. But breaking it will not be without cost. A curse that deep clings to the soul like tar. To sever it, you must walk into darkness yourself. Risk letting it touch you more deeply." Rohan slammed his fist on the table. "Then I will walk it. Better to risk death than to wither like an old man in his bed." The hermit studied him, then nodded slowly. From beneath a heap of rags he drew a shard of black crystal, jagged as ice. It pulsed faintly with a sickly light. "Carry this," the hermit said. "It will draw the curse into itself, for a time. But beware, the crystal is a vessel. If it shatters, the curse will return tenfold." Rohan took it, feeling the chill bite into his palm. His vision swam, and for a heartbeat he heard laughter, a cold, mocking sound. He knew, then, the hermit had spoken truth. When they departed the hut, snow was falling thick, muffling the world. Yet Rohan's heart burned hotter than it had in weeks. For the first time, he had a weapon against the unseen foe. But far away, in the chambers of the council, Kaelor stirred. He felt the tug on his tether, the resistance of the crystal. And he smiled. "So," the sorcerer whispered, "the wolf begins to gnaw the chain. Good, let him struggle. For the more he fights, the deeper he binds himself to me." The march to the eastern frontier was a slow grind. News of raiders, men sworn to no lord, half mad from hunger and cold, had reached Frosthaven. Rohan, weakened though he still was, refused to let others carry the burden. With the black crystal at his side, he rode at the head of his company. At first it seemed to help. The sickness in his limbs eased, the fever in his bones dulled. He could lift his sword again without trembling. Yet the crystal pulsed faintly against his chest, as though it breathed with him. Each night, in dreams, he felt its cold heartbeat echo in his own. On the fourth day they reached the frontier. The land was a scar of fire and ice, villages blackened by torches, snow stained with blood. The raiders had left only ruin behind them, but as Rohan surveyed the smoldering wrecks, a horn sounded from the hills. The enemy was not gone. They came down in waves, fur-clad men with axes and spears, their faces painted with ash and blood. Behind them howled warhounds, snapping at their leashes. Rohan's men tightened ranks, shields locking, the banner of Frosthaven rising in the snowstorm wind. "Hold!" Rohan roared, raising his sword. "Hold, and let them break upon us like surf on stone." The first clash was thunder. Steel met steel, shields splintered, blood sprayed on snow. Rohan's strength surged, more than he had felt in months. He cut through two men with a single swing, his voice carrying above the din. But then it happened. As one raider swung low, Rohan lifted his blade to parry, and the crystal flared. Dark frost leapt from his sword, crawling up the raider's arm, freezing flesh and bone in an instant. The man screamed, his body shattering like brittle glass. The battlefield fell still for a breath. Friend and foe alike stared at Rohan, at the unnatural ice spreading across the snow. "By the gods," one of his men whispered. Rohan himself staggered back, horror dawning in his eyes. He had not willed it. The power had leapt on its own, hungry, eager. Yet as the enemy regrouped, charging again, something inside him yielded. His grip tightened, and he swung, and again the dark frost poured forth. Raider after raider fell, not by steel but by sorcery. Ice crept into their veins, freezing them solid, leaving grotesque statues behind. The warhounds whimpered and fled, their masters howling in terror. Within moments, what should have been a desperate battle became a rout. When the last of the enemy broke and fled into the storm, silence fell once more. Only the crunch of boots in snow as Rohan's soldiers drew back from him. Aelin approached slowly, her face pale. "What was that?" she asked. Rohan's chest heaved. The crystal was dim now, but warm against his skin as though it had feasted well. "I don't know," he admitted. His voice was hoarse. But it turned the tide. "Rohan," she said, almost pleading, "that was not you. That was his hand upon you." Her words struck like a blade. For in the fire of battle, when the frost had leapt from him, he had heard it again. The laughter, cold, distant, mocking. Kaelor. Rohan turned his face from his men, who looked on with both awe and unease. To them, he was no longer just the Iceborn lord. He was something else, something darker. That night, as the campfires burned low, Rohan sat apart, staring at his hands. He had won, yes, but at what price? Each victory fed the crystal, and each heartbeat bound him closer to the one who had cast the curse. In the shadows of the council chambers, Kaelor smiled again, watching through unseen eyes. "Fight, wolf," the sorcerer murmured. "Every swing of your sword feeds me. Every drop of blood you spill is mine. Soon, you will not know where your strength ends and where I begin." When the company returned to Frosthaven, the gates swung open to a storm of cheers. Messengers had ridden ahead with tales of victory, of how Lord Rohan had crushed the raiders and saved the frontier. But the cheers faltered when the men saw him ride in. It wasn't the wounds, though he bore them. It wasn't the exhaustion in his eyes. It was the way his soldiers walked behind him, silent, uneasy, glancing at their lord as though he were both savior and specter. The whispers began before sunset. "They say he froze a man with a single touch. Shards of ice straight from his sword. A gift from the gods, or a curse from darker hands." Rohan felt the weight of every murmur. He walked the halls of his keep, once filled with warmth, and found them colder than the snow outside. Servants bowed lower but did not meet his eyes. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, then vanished at his approach. Only Aelin stayed close, though even she kept her hand near her dagger. "Your people are afraid," she told him, standing in the council chamber where firelight threw their shadows tall. "You must show them you are still their lord, still the man you were before." "And what if I am not?" Rohan asked. His voice cracked, though he fought to keep it steady. "On the battlefield, I felt it, Aelin. The frost leapt from me before I could think. It wanted blood, and I let it." Aelin stepped closer, gripping his arm. "You did what you had to do. You saved lives. Without that power, half your men would be carrion for the crows." "But at what cost?" He pulled free, pacing before the fire. "Every time I draw on it, I hear him. Kaelor, laughing, waiting. The crystal does not serve me, Aelin. I serve it." Unseen by them, a shadow shifted in the corner, one of the council spies, listening. Before the hour was done, the whispers would grow into rumors, and rumors into something more dangerous. That evening, the council convened. The high chamber was filled with banners, their colors dim in the flickering torchlight. Lords and ladies, cloaked in furs, sat in heavy silence as Rohan entered. He expected respect. Instead, he met suspicion. "You wielded sorcery on the battlefield," Lord Dareth accused, slamming his fist against the table. "We have witnesses. Men turned to ice before your very eyes. Such things are not of man's making." "Nor of man's choosing," Rohan replied, forcing his voice calm. "The crystal was thrust upon me. Would you rather I had cast down my sword and let our people die?" "Better to die as men," Lady Eris spat, "than live under the rule of a half-sorcerer." The chamber erupted in argument. Some shouted for gratitude, others for caution, a few for exile. Rohan stood in the storm of voices, each word striking like a blade. He caught glimpses of faces that once swore loyalty, now twisting with doubt. Finally, the High Elder rose. His beard was white, his staff trembling as he leaned upon it. "Peace," he commanded, and the room fell silent. His eyes, clouded yet sharp, fixed on Rohan. "You are our lord. You won us a victory, but the truth cannot be denied. If what is said is true, then darkness clings to you. We cannot walk blind into its snare." Rohan met his gaze. "And what would you have me do?" The elder's voice was grave. "Prove yourself. Submit to trial by the flame of the ancestors. If the fire accepts you, then you are no sorcerer, but a man blessed. If it burns you—" The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. "Then we will know what you truly are." That night, alone in his chamber, Rohan stared into the hearth fire. Trial by flame, an ancient rite, older than Frosthaven itself. The innocent would pass unharmed, the guilty would be consumed. He clenched his fists. Guilty of what? Of carrying a curse he did not choose? Of using power to save his men? If the fire burned him, would it be proof of corruption? Or proof that the gods themselves were blind? The crystal pulsed faintly at his side, warm as a heartbeat. And for the first time, Rohan did not know if he feared failing the trial or passing it. Far away, Kaelor's laughter echoed in the night. "Burn, wolf, burn! One way or another, the fire will be mine."